My name is Charlene Margot, and I'm the founder of the Parent Education Series and co-founder with my partner, Bev Hartman, of nonprofit The Parent Venture. We are so glad to have you with us tonight, and we are so excited to welcome Dr. Kendall Bronk for helping your children and teens discover their purpose in life. With more than 400 people registered for the program this evening, we know this is a very important topic for our kids and for ourselves, but we just really could not be more delighted. If you would like Spanish interpretation this evening, we have with us interpreter Cynthia Hinestrosa. At the bottom of your screen, you will see a globe icon to hear Spanish. Click on the globe icon and then Spanish. All right, thank you. So again, special thanks to Dr. Kendall Bronk and our sponsors for tonight, Peninsula Health Care District. We are very pleased to be partnering with them this year to bring you great parent education programming, and we could not be more honored. This event is one of two that we are sponsoring with the district this year. So again, this is our spring special event. Tonight's format will follow our typical schedule, which is Kendall will speak for about 45 minutes, and then we want to take questions from you, the audience. You have at the bottom of your screen, again, the chat button. Many of you are familiar with that. Please use the chat for comments, ask questions of us, the panelists, share your thoughts, but we'd like questions for the Q&A to go into the Q&A button. So questions in the Q&A, comments in the chat. We will be watching both as the evening goes on. If you could keep your questions kind of short, we'd appreciate it because we want to get to as many of them as we can. Also in the chat, my partner Bev will be posting relevant links. So look for information there, as well as at the end of the evening, a very short survey that we hope that you will take a moment to fill out. This event will be recorded and available on our free video library YouTube channel. We work with the Boys and Girls Club of the Peninsula to edit and produce these videos. So it usually takes them a few days to get it prepared. Hopefully by the end of the weekend, we'll have that video up for you. Our next event is next Thursday, April 21st, from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Peninsula Daylight Time with Professor Laura Huang from the Harvard Business School. And she will be talking about her new book, Edge, Turning Adversity into Advantage, and how we can help our children and teens find their unique edge. All right, let me tell you a little bit about tonight's keynote presenter. Dr. Kendall Bragg is a professor of psychology in the Division of Behavioral and Social Sciences at Claremont Graduate University, one of the Claremont colleges in Southern California. She is a developmental scientist interested in understanding and supporting the positive development and moral growth of young people. Most recently, she's investigated these topics through the lens of young people's purposes in life. Work in her Adolescent Moral Development Lab is focused on addressing two primary questions around purpose. First, what does purpose look like among diverse groups of young people, including those growing up amidst global economic challenges? And second, how can you help youth discover the things that give their lives purpose? To that end, she and her colleagues have designed and tested strategies for fostering purpose among adolescents and young adults. Dr. Bronk has published extensively on purpose and positive youth development in leading peer-reviewed journals and books, and her research has appeared in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, NBC, Education Nation, and NPR. Please join me in a really warm virtual welcome for tonight's keynote presenter, Dr. Kendall Bronk. Take it away, Kendall.
Thank you, Charlene. I appreciate that very generous introduction. I am going to share my screen here. So give me just one moment so I can pull up our slides. And all right, I think I got it. Hopefully you're seeing that all okay. I just wanted to say quickly, thank you so much for having me here this evening. I'm really excited to have this opportunity to talk with you and to share a little bit about the research that my colleagues and I have been doing, and about all the good things we've learned about strategies and activities and things that you can try to help your child or your teen to discover their purpose in life. I've studied this topic for the last 15 years, I think now. When I first started in the field, I was a grad student actually up in your neck of the woods at Stanford. And at the time, there was very little psychological research on the topic. However, since then, research has grown quite quickly. So I've studied purpose among young people from across the country, including young people from all different socioeconomic backgrounds, young people from very, very low socioeconomic backgrounds, more middle class young people, and wealthier young people as well. I've also studied purpose among adolescent and young adult cancer survivors, which has been a really interesting line of work. I've studied purpose among young people from around the world, including youth in Taiwan. And at the height of the Great Recession, we studied purpose among youth in Greece. I've also studied purpose looking at street children growing up in Liberia. And I think as a result of these really varied experiences, I've gained a pretty good understanding of what it means to lead a life of purpose among diverse groups of young people in a really broad range of contexts. And through all of this, I've learned a lot in my own research and also through reading my colleagues' research about how parents can help their children and adolescents discover a purpose for their lives. Parents play a really important role in this task. So I'm really eager to share with you a little about what we've learned here tonight. So here's my plan for my talk tonight. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I mean when I say a purpose in life. How exactly we define this phrase when we're conducting scientific research on the topic. Next, I plan to review some of the research that really focuses on why this is something we should care about, right? What are the benefits of leading a life of purpose? So I'll spell out what the research has to say about both the psychological and the physical health benefits associated with leading a life of purpose. And after that, I'll get into some empirically supported strategies that parents can use to help their children and their teens discover a purpose for their lives. And this is really where I plan to spend the bulk of my time on these strategies that you can hopefully enact in your lives. Finally, at the end, though, I will be sure to leave some time for questions. So before I get into these topics, I wanted to ask you if you could just take a moment and consider something. What gives your life purpose? What is it that you really care about? What are you trying to or hoping to accomplish in your life? So let me give you just give you a few moments to think about this. All right, so I realize I didn't give you too much time, but hopefully just enough to start to think about the sources of inspiring purpose in your own life. And I ask you to reflect on this very intentionally, because if you want to help your children or your teens identify their purpose in life, it's really helpful to first clarify your own. So I think that some of the strategies that I'll talk about later in this evening are strategies that you can use with your children, but they're strategies you can use in your own life as well. All right, so let's keep going here. As I said, one of the first things that I wanted to do was to think about and talk a little bit about how it is that we define this construct of purpose. When I asked you to reflect on your purpose in life, I'm guessing that you knew exactly what I was talking about. And that's because we really have our own conception of what it means to lead a life of purpose. But when we're really interested in digging into the science of purpose, it's important that we have a definition that is clearly spelled out, that is something we can widely agree upon, and something that can be operationalized, or which means, measured in scientific studies. So with that in mind, my colleagues and I proposed this definition, which has been really quite widely used in the research on purpose. So it's a little bit of a mouthful, but I've got it written on the slide here. A purpose in life is a long-term, forward-looking intention to accomplish aims that are both meaningful to the self and of consequence to the world beyond the self. So like I said, a little bit of a mouthful, but let me kind of highlight the three components of that definition that I think are really important. The first one is that a purpose in life, it's a goal of sorts. It's not a short-term objective, however, it's more of like a far horizon aim that you're working toward. It's something you intend to accomplish, or at least make some progress toward in the future in your own life. All right, so that's the first part. It's kind of like a goal. The second part is that it is personally meaningful. So of course we have lots of goals, lots of long-term far horizon goals, but some of them are more personally meaningful to us than others. And a purpose in life is a very personally meaningful goal. It's something we care deeply about, something we value. And empirical research, we look for evidence that it matters enough to people that they're willing to invest their time, their energy, and their personal resources in making progress towards it. So that's the second part of the definition. It's a long-term, far horizon goal that you really care about, that really matters. And then the third part of the definition is that in addition to being significant to the self, a purpose in life is also of consequence to the world beyond the self. And by that, I mean that a purpose is personally meaningful intention that is motivated in large part by a desire to make some kind of difference in the broader world. So a purpose, if we sort of take those three parts of the definition together, it's really the way that we use our skills and our talents to make a personally meaningful difference in the broader world. And as such, a purpose in life serves as a really important beacon or compass, guiding our daily actions and our daily decisions in a particularly meaningful direction. So based on this definition, or based on this conception of purpose, our research finds that young people today find purpose in a really wide variety of activities, including in serving God, in creating works of art, in supporting social and political change, in serving their communities, and in caring for their families. So there are lots of different ways of discovering or of leading a life of purpose. All right, so at this point, I hope I have more clarified sort of what it is I mean when I talk about purpose. And now I want to focus on, why should we care about this? Why should I bother to try to help my child or my teenager discover a purpose for their lives? What difference does it make? Well, it turns out that there's a growing body of research that suggests that leading a life of purpose is associated with a whole host of both psychological and physical health benefits, not to mention academic benefits as well. So let me just touch on some of those sort of briefly. Compared to individuals who lack a clear sense of purpose in life, those with a purpose tend to report better physical health. So more specifically, they tend to report better cardiovascular health, less chronic pain, and particularly relevant to young people, they report better sleep. I always find that one kind of it's surprising, but I guess it makes sense, right? If you know what it is that you're trying to accomplish in life, there's fewer sleepless nights. You tend to report fewer sleep disturbances. And perhaps not surprisingly, given that sort of long list of health benefits, physical health benefits associated with leading a life of purpose, research also finds that individuals with a clear purpose in life, they actually live longer, which is pretty remarkable. However, they don't just live longer lives, they also live better lives, at least more psychologically happy and healthy lives. And so maybe given that purpose is associated with all of these physical health benefits, maybe it won't surprise you to learn that it's also associated with a big range of psychological health benefits. So for example, individuals with purpose compared to others report higher levels of hope, higher levels of happiness, and higher levels of life satisfaction. So this is interesting. One of the things you might notice is that a lot of this research is correlational in nature, which means that purpose kind of goes along with good health. So at least in theory, it could be the case that people with, leading a life of purpose causes people to have good health, or it could be the case that people with good health are more likely to discover a purpose for their lives. Well, so recently there's been some research in med schools looking at that to better understand, is it the case that leading a life of purpose actually contributes to, or maybe even causes these physical, positive health outcomes. And so there's epigenetic research that has been underway. And what's really interesting is you remember the genotype and the phenotype. You have the the expression of genes that shows and the expression of genes that doesn't. Well, it turns out that individuals who lead lives of purpose, they actually have more healthy, more healthful genetic expressions, which they suggest is the mechanism through which purpose actually contributes to and helps to cause these physical health outcomes. So I find that research to be really interesting. Lastly, and just kind of briefly, I also wanted to mention that in addition to these pretty powerful psychological and physical health benefits associated with leading a life of purpose, there's also a range of academic indicators of academic success that are associated with purpose. So for instance, we know that individuals with purpose, they report being grittier, being more resilient, feeling more efficacious about their academic pursuits, better able to tackle them. And they feel a better sense that they can really master their schoolwork. So an interesting study actually found that young people with purpose reported that their schoolwork was more meaningful to them. And I think this makes sense, right? If you know what it is that you're really working to accomplish in your life, it might be easier to start to see how the work you're doing in school is relevant and how it's going to help get you there. And as a result, that schoolwork might feel a lot more meaningful. So I think those findings they always kind of blow me away. But I hope for those reasons that you're interested in thinking a little bit about why you might want to go to the extra effort to help the young people in your life discover and pursue purpose. So do most young people know what their purpose is? Well, despite the benefits of leading a life of purpose, we find that most young people, in fact, even most adults, report that they actually don't know what their purpose is. Research finds that only about 1 in 10 early adolescents and 1 in 5 high school aged youth reports having a purpose in life. Now, the numbers get a little better as you get a little older. So in the college years, about 1 in 3 college-aged youth, they can really articulate a purpose for their lives, but it's still a minority of individuals. And so I think that's an interesting finding to attend to, that most young people actually struggle to articulate a clear purpose for their lives. So I want to just highlight one thing here. You might have noted that I started with early adolescence, right? I didn't focus on rates of purpose among children, and that was really quite intentional. We really don't expect children to develop a clear purpose in life. Cognitively, they aren't equipped to do so. They're not ready to engage in critical thinking and abstract reasoning and hypothetical and deductive thought processes, all of these which are really essential in supporting a purpose in life. However, having said that, there are still things that parents of younger children can do to set the stage for purpose development down the road. And that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit more in just a moment. So first, though, before I get to that, I do want to make it clear that young people don't always or even just stumble onto their own purpose in life, right? The rates of purpose are pretty low, which means that left to their own devices, some young people, but a minority of young people, will figure out their purpose in life. Most young people require some help in figuring it out. And this is where you, as the parent, come in. So knowing that a purpose is beneficial in a wide range of ways to young people, and knowing also that it's really relatively rare, now I want to turn my attention to talking about some of the ways that our research suggests parents might want to encourage the development of purpose in their young people. So I'm not going to get as much into the research here, but I do want you to know that all of these strategies are based on lots of research. And so these are not just suggestions that come out of the clear blue sky. And the way I'm going to do it, the way I'm going to talk about these different approaches, I'm going to start with younger children and talk about approaches that work for younger children, then slightly older children, and I'll get to adolescents and teens last. But I think it's important to keep in mind that some of the strategies that work particularly well for younger children, those might also work for older children, or maybe a modified version of them would work just as well for your adolescent. So don't feel as though you have to be bound by the constraints of the ages. I just think that some of these seem more readily applicable to the ages that I've kind of identified here. All right, so like I said, we'll start with young school-aged children. So here I'm thinking about maybe 5, 6, 7-year-olds. And again, I don't want to suggest that kindergartners or first graders and second graders, they really shouldn't know what their purpose in life is just yet. They're not there yet. They're having all kinds of wonderful experiences and learning about themselves. And so it is not the goal for them to, be able to articulate a clear purpose in their lives. However, despite that, there are things that you as a parent or maybe as a teacher or a mentor or a community member, things that you can do now to help ready young children to discover and pursue their purpose in life when they're developmentally ready to do so. So the important thing here is to help your children see that what they do matters. You really want to help the children recognize that even if they're young, even if they're 5 or 6 or 7, they can do things to give back to their families and to their communities and to their schools in really important and significant ways. So the focus with young children is usually, right, when we're interacting with children this young, we're almost always focused on, what we as the adult need to do for them. And of course, this is largely quite appropriate. Young children need our help. But at the same time, I think it's nice to also remember that young children, they can be pretty useful too, right? There are ways that they can be helpful and that they can give back, whether it's to their families or schools or communities. So consider asking even young children as young as 5, 6, and 7 to do some chores around the house. But these don't need to be big jobs, but maybe they could feed the dog or clear the table after dinner or keep their room clean. The idea is for them to see that they can be helpful and that they can be useful. So maybe find a few chores that they can do on their own and avoid the temptation to help them out when they forget or when they don't want to do it. Talk about how all the family members contribute to the household and they're no different. And let them see that if they forget to water the plant will die. Right? If they forget to feed the dog will whine. So it's important for them to really recognize that their contributions matter. And this is an important first step to thinking about how they will be able to give back later in life. In addition to helping children give back to their families, help them consider ways that they can give back to their communities. So rather than just cleaning out their closets for them, which, as summer dawns here, it's an activity that is underway at my household, ask them to help you and to talk about what you're going to do with the used clothing and the used toys that they're no longer interested in. Ask them what they think should be done with these things. And if possible, maybe make some suggestions. You might suggest that they could donate these things to a local shelter. And if that sounds like something of interest to your child, consider taking the child with you to the shelter and explain to them that not everybody has a home and not everybody has new clothes and that they need to help, that children in more fortunate circumstances, they can help. They can donate their used toys and clothes to people in need. Another activity that you might consider is helping them have a lemonade stand or something similar. There's nothing magical about lemonade, but ask them to think about what they'd like to do with the money that they earn. They might want to donate the money that they make to a church or to a local animal shelter if they're interested in animals. The idea here is to involve them as much as possible in the process of taking, seeing that they work hard, they earn some money, and they can use this money to contribute in some way that matters to them. So these kinds of conversations can be really, impactful, helping the young person to just start to think about how they can help others and how they can give back. Around the holidays, there are often opportunities for young children to get involved in canned food drives and food banks. The idea is to get creative. But whatever you do, remember to talk to your children about the importance of finding ways that matter to them to contribute to their families and to their communities. That message is really important for preparing them for purpose later in life. So again, I've highlighted ways of helping young school-age children focus on ways that they can contribute, but maybe some of these ways would be relevant to older children and even to adolescents. So it's not to say that these activities couldn't be altered in some shape or form to appeal to slightly older children or adolescents. They certainly could be. I will say that the research is really clear, though, that the young people who engage in volunteer activities, they're much more likely to develop a purpose later in life. So these kinds of early experiences of volunteering, of donating, of contributing, of giving back can be really impactful down the road. All right, so on to my next slide. So moving along a bit here in terms of ages, now we can maybe think a little bit more about slightly older middle school or school age children. So maybe 8, 9, and 10-year-olds. Again, they're still far too young to have a clear purpose in life. It's still not they're not there yet. But as with younger children, it's not too soon to encourage them to focus on the things that will make them attuned to purpose when they're older. So also like the younger children, 8, 9, and 10-year-olds should of course be encouraged to do some chores and to find ways to contribute to the household and maybe to their schools and communities. But I feel like parents, well, they might already be inclined to think about these things for school-age children. And so I want to focus on some different approaches to cultivating purpose among these slightly older children. And one perhaps surprising way of cultivating purposeful thinking is to encourage gratitude. So this is kind of counterintuitive, but help your child focus on the blessings in their lives and on the people who have really blessed them. One way you can do this is through an exercise called 3 Good Things. You can do this around the dinner table at night or when you're tucking your kids into bed. But however you or wherever you choose to sort of fit it into your daily routine, try to make it a somewhat regular activity. It doesn't have to be every single day, but maybe a couple days a week. And what you would do is ask your child to share 3 good things that happened to them during the day. Encourage them to be just as specific as possible. And this will really help them to focus on the blessings in their lives. So, what happens when you do this on a somewhat regular basis is your child will wake up the next day and they'll know that, I'm going to be asked tonight about 3 things that happened that were good, three things that happened to me today. So I'm going to be on the lookout all day long for all of the gratitude experiences or the things that I'm grateful for. And that's really the makings of a grateful mindset, which is, to be perfectly honest, a great thing to cultivate in its own right, but also a great approach to cultivating purpose. So I'll say more in just a minute about the mechanism through which gratitude can cultivate purpose. But before I do that, I want to talk about one other approach to cultivating gratitude in your school-age children, and that might be through writing a gratitude letter. So this is a little like a thank you letter, but it's not a thank you for a particular gift. Instead, a gratitude letter expresses thanks to a person. Maybe it's a special coach or a teacher or an extended family member who has really gone out of his or her way to help your child. So in the letter, encourage your child to write about the ways that he or she benefited, and also to focus on the way that the helper incurred some kind of cost. So the cost may have been a monetary cost. It may have been the cost of some time. It may have been the cost of other personal resources. But generally, if people are really helping your child, it does cost them something. And so that's a nice thing to acknowledge in a gratitude letter. And then finally, encourage your child in this same letter to express a recognition that this person, they could have chosen to help anybody, but they intentionally chose to help your child. And here your child might write about how that made them feel. So I have a 5th grader who loves to play baseball, and he really wanted to learn to pitch. He had a coach year before last who was just really amazing. And he happened to be a college pitcher, and he made it his mission to help teach my son to pitch. He had my son stay late after practices, and the two of them would practice pitching. They added extra practices in so he could get more work. He introduced my son to different kinds of pitches and gave him some exercises he could do to help strengthen his arm. And in the my son, he did learn to pitch, and I asked him if he might want to write a gratitude letter to his coach. So we talked about the benefits to him, how he was grateful to know how to pitch and how he really enjoyed being on the mound. He also talked about the cost to his coach, about how he recognized that his coach gave up a lot of his own time to help my son. And finally, he told his coach how it made him feel really special, that he shared his pitching secrets and expertise with him in particular. So that sort of 3-part structure of identifying the benefits to the recipient, the cost to the helper, and a recognition that the helper could have helped other people. That 3-part structure is really important to cultivating a genuinely grateful mindset. It also makes for a really nice letter. It tends to be really impactful to both the recipient and the giver. So I'll stop there in terms of talking about gratitude exercises. I'm sure you can come up with all different kinds of activities that would cultivate gratitude. These are 2 that have been tested out pretty regularly in research, but that's not to say that they're the only ones that would work. So hopefully this kind of gives you some activities to start to think about how you might design, other activities to fit better in your own life, but that would do the same thing, cultivate that grateful mindset. And doing this is really worthwhile. Cultivating this grateful mindset is really worthwhile because the research finds that people who habitually practice gratitude, they're inclined to start to think about ways they want to give back. So as people reflect on the many blessings in their own lives and on the people who have blessed them, they're likely to feel somewhat indebted. And one way of relieving this feeling of indebtedness is to give back or pay it forward. And that can often take the form of a purposeful activity or of a purpose in life. So as you work on encouraging a grateful mindset in your children, which, like I said, even if you don't want to do it as a means to cultivate purpose, is still a very useful endeavor. Make sure to pay attention to their interests around giving back. So, and as these interests begin to blossom, support those efforts and really encourage them. So just stay attuned to the ways that they talk about wanting to give back as a result of the gratitude. Another way of setting the stage for purpose development among children is to focus on their sparks. So the late Peter Benson, who was just an amazing researcher, he passed away way too soon, really, really committed to the well-being of young people. He pioneered this research on sparks. And sparks are really those activities that children are just passionate about. Often sparks represent a child's special gifts, special talents, and later on in life, those sparks will often give way to purpose. They can serve as really personally meaningful medium for enacting an individual's purpose in life. So pay attention to the kinds of things that your children really enjoy doing. Pay attention to the things that they light up about. Pay attention to the things they do when they're not doing something else, right? When they're not engaged in another sort of organized activity or school. Pay attention and recognize them for those activities and help them really cultivate those sparks, because those might be the seeds of a future purpose in life. All right, so we are marching right along through the child development stages of life here, and now we're up to adolescence. And I'm actually going to include young adults here too. So these are activities that have actually been tested among both teens and young adults. So this is really the stage in the lifespan, adolescence and young adulthood, where young people are both socially and cognitively ready to start to think about and seriously reflect on their purpose in life. Now, they may still, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to figure it all out right away, but it does mean that they're moving that way. The research here is really quite clear. Purpose formation goes along with or works in tandem with identity development. So as young people begin to consider who it is that they want to become in life, and that's really the primary identity question, they're also likely to reflect on what it is that they want to accomplish in their lives. And that's really the purpose question. So identity development and purpose formation can get underway as early adolescence. That said, the search for purpose may last a while, and just as identity development may last a while. And it may be the case that young people don't fully settle on a purpose, just as they may not fully settle on an identity until quite a bit later in life. For many young people, they don't have a clear sense of who they are or of what they really want to accomplish in their lives until their mid-20s. But as I said, our goal as parents should really be to help prepare our children so that they're ready to reflect on their purpose in life, and they have the tools and inclination to do so when the time comes. So one of the first things you can do with adolescents is to model your own purpose in life. Talk about the things that give your life purpose. I had you reflect on that a little bit earlier this evening. Maybe you find purpose in the work that you do. Maybe you find purpose in being a parent. Maybe you find purpose in volunteer work that you do or through your religious faith. Whatever the case may be, talk about it with your adolescent. Share this with them. We don't tend to do this all that often, but it can be a really effective way for an adolescent to see what a purpose can look like in a life that they recognize quite well. I will say here, just one caveat, remember that you're talking with adolescents. It's really important to be authentic. Don't lie about your purpose or make one up on the spot. Or if you're really struggling to identify your own purpose in life, it's probably okay to share that with your adolescent too. But I just think it's important to highlight that adolescents, and if you're the parent of one, you probably already know this, are very attuned to inauthenticity. So if you're going to have this kind of conversation with an adolescent in your life, and I encourage you to do so, just make sure to do it in a really authentic way. All right, so I want to focus on another strategy that research finds can be really effective for adolescents and for young adults. And so I'll start with a little story about my own research. Early in my research on purpose, members of my research team and we were involved in a study. It was designed to answer two questions. We wanted to know, first, how prevalent is purpose among young people today? And second, what does a purpose look like in the lives of young people today? So to address that first question about the prevalence of purpose, we administered surveys to more than 1,000 young people across the country. And the surveys really gauged the extent to which young people reported finding purpose in their lives. To address that second question, which was about, what does a purpose in life look like in the lives of young people today, we conducted interviews with a randomly selected subset of the surveyed youth. The aim of the interviews, like I said, was to just really understand the kinds of aims that filled young people's lives with purpose and to better understand how it is that young people today develop and pursue a purpose for their lives. So first, we administered the surveys, and then we randomly selected a subset of those young people to participate in about a 45-minute interview. And the interviews focused on, what matters most to youth? What is it that young people, we asked them, what do you really care about? What are you trying to accomplish in your life? And why? Why do you care about this? Why is this important to you? Why do you want to accomplish this in your life? It turns out that why is really important. And we recorded these interviews, and at the end, we were really surprised by the reaction that we got from our adolescent participants. they would tell us things like, no one's ever asked me these questions before. And they said things like, can I get a copy of that recording? Or can I get a printout of your transcript from the interview? They said, I said some good stuff in there and I want to keep track of that. And this made us wonder if maybe the interview hadn't been kind of an unintentional intervention of sorts. As luck would have it, we had already planned to do a second round of surveys several months later. So a colleague of mine, he actually compared the Adolescence Purpose scores from before and after the interview, and he looked at the interviewees and the young people who were not interviewed. And he found that indeed the young people who had been interviewed showed significantly higher scores on purpose months later. And we thought that was pretty interesting, that just this one time 45-minute conversation about the things that mattered most to them was enough to significantly help these young people discover a purpose for their lives. So I share this story for a couple of reasons. First, I share it because talking to the young person about the things that matter most to them and about what they want out of their lives, it's a really important way of helping them identify their purpose in life. I find that all too often the conversations we have with adolescents are really short-term in nature. What are you going to go to, which high school are you going to go to next year? What foreign language do you want to take? What are you going to do this weekend? Right, they're really short-term kinds of questions that we tend to ask. And we forget to ask them about these sort of far horizon aims, right? What do you want out of your life? How do you want to leave your mark? What do you want to accomplish? And it turns out that adolescents are really eager to consider and reflect on these kinds of questions. So I also tell you this story for a second reason, and that is this: I want you to realize that cultivating purpose is actually a pretty feasible activity. If a one-time conversation with a stranger could have that intended effect, certainly efforts by a parent can make a really big difference. So that's all to say to, give it a try. All right, let's see. I've got one more strategy here that I want to share with you, and then I'll wrap up. This is another strategy that is likely to be particularly effective with adolescents and young adults, and this is one that we tested out in our lab. So what we did was we asked young people to send an email to at least 5 adults who know them really well. So these could be extended family members, they could be coaches, they could be mentors, they could be teachers, they could be neighbors, family friends. You might help the young person come up with a good list of 5 people. But they send an email to these 5 people just asking these 5 people to answer 3 questions about the young person. The questions are: what do you think I'm particularly good at? What do you think I really enjoy doing? And how do you think I'll leave my mark? Now, I should say it's important to give, if this is where parents can help out a little, you might give the adults a little heads up that this email is coming. Sometimes adults feel like they need to spend hours reflecting on these questions, and then the email falls by the wayside and they never get back to adolescence. And that can be a bit demoralizing if an adolescent sends out all of these requests and doesn't get an email back. So if you can help them, maybe even, call a family friend and say, my son or daughter is going to send you this email. No need to spend more than 5 minutes. I really want just your gut reactions. But if you could spend 5 minutes answering those questions for him or her and email back your responses just ASAP, we'd sure appreciate it. And so, like I said, we tested this out in our lab, and the responses the young people told us were really eye-opening. So it turned out that although sometimes the adolescents, they didn't always know what their purpose was, sometimes their friends and their family members, they may have a pretty good idea, or at least they may be able to offer some really interesting and useful insights to get the adolescents started on their own sort of journey of self-reflection. So of course, you don't have to reach out via email. Maybe you want to do it text or in person, or however. But this activity, we tested it via email, and it seemed to work pretty well. Well, I should say it was actually very significant. So, all right, so we're getting there in terms of time. Let me just sort of review what I talked about so far with regards to strategies and activities that you can engage in with the young people in your life to help them really reflect on and hopefully discover their own purpose in life. So just to remind you, one of the first activities we talked about was chores. Ask your children to do chores, and not just to do the chores, but encourage them to think about how this is an important opportunity for them to be useful, to make a contribution to the family. So it's really important for them to sort of get that message that we need you and we need the gifts and the help that you can offer in this family. Encourage children and adolescents as well to find ways of giving back in their communities. So this might be in the form of volunteer work. But again, here, remember that just doing the volunteer work isn't enough. You want to also help your children to really reflect on the difference that their efforts make. That reflection around how are they able to use their skills and talents to make a difference in their community. That reflection is key. Something else you could try is cultivating a grateful mindset. And I gave you a couple of activities that you could use to do that, focusing on 3 good things, right? The blessings in your children's lives, or a gratitude letter, but I'm sure you can come up with other kinds of activities. The focus here, though, is just focusing on the blessings and on the people who have blessed us or who have blessed your children. And we know that reflection just naturally inclines young people to start to think about how they want to give back and make their contribution. And then next, recognize, validate, and really encourage children's special interests and skills or their sparks. So even though I talked about this one with regards to children, again, I think it's really relevant to teens too. What do your teens enjoy doing when they have some free time? What kinds of books do they like to read for pleasure? These activities point to the interests that may serve as sparks in their lives. And as I suggested, sparks can really form the seeds that grow into purpose later in life. Especially with older adolescents, model purpose. Talk to them about the things that give your own life purpose and encourage them to look for those things in their own lives, to look for the kinds of sources of purpose in their own life. Here, of course, remember to be authentic. Have conversations with your adolescent about the things that they most hope to accomplish in their lives. Ask them about what really matters, about these sort of far horizon aims and why. Why do these things really matter? And then lastly, encourage them to reach out to friends and family who know them well and ask them to reflect on what your child is good at, what they enjoy doing, and how they will leave their mark. The feedback you get could be really helpful, really eye-opening, and might help them discover their own purpose in life. So each of these activities should help your child or your teen discover what really matters in their lives. And before I sign off here, I just want to share a couple of resources with you. These are books and activities, some of which are online. The first one is a book by a Stanford professor, my advisor, and it's a great book about how to help young people find purpose in their lives. The next one is a blog entry through the Greater Good Science Center at UC Berkeley with 5 strategies. You'll recognize some of the things I talked about here in this evening in this blog entry. Understanding purpose through interviews. I can share this with you. Hopefully I'll share these slides with Charlene and she can make them available to you, because if you click on that hypertext link, it takes you to that interview that we used with adolescents. So you can conduct and it had that, purpose cultivating effect, and you can conduct that interview with your own child or adolescent. There's also this purpose challenge, which is a toolkit online. It's a whole lot of purpose resources that are free and available to you. And then there's a podcast, The Science of Happiness, where this was also put out by the UC Berkeley Greater Good Science Center. And it's what's the why in your life? Just a maybe 20, 25-minute podcast about purpose. So these are all resources that I would encourage you to access if you're interested in learning a little bit more about how to help the child or adolescent in your life discover their purpose in life. So we've got about 10 or 11 minutes left. And so I will wrap up there and say thank you so much for your time and your attention. And I look forward to any questions you might have for me.
Thank you, Kendall. We are so inspired now to help our kids find their life purpose, whether they are 5 or 15 or 25. Just wonderful advice. Always
Thank you.
great. And we have some really great questions coming in. So let's get started. This is actually a question I love that came in Spanish. What can a mother do when she asks her adolescent what she wants to achieve in her life and she says, I don't know?
I don't know. Yeah. And that's what happens, right? I mean, I think you have to think of this as a bit of a process. It, if I were to, probably when I asked you at the beginning of this talk to reflect on your own purpose in life, there's probably a good number of you that said, I don't know, right? It's a process. And so try some of these different activities. And if the first one doesn't work, that's okay. Try a second one, try a third one, and see if through the process, I think what we find is these activities are significant, but there's no one activity that works for everybody. And that's why I gave you a whole host of them. And you will probably find that different activities will work better for different young people. But think of it as a process. We're trying, some different conversations, maybe bringing in friends and family to share their insights, focus maybe on gratitude. I think one of the reasons that gratitude is such a useful route through which to cultivate purpose is that it's a lot easier for us to think about who are the people who have really blessed you in your life, right? That's a lot less intimidating question. And is a lot less, you're less likely to get the answer of, I don't know, and more likely to get a laundry list of names. And so try some of these different activities and see, be patient. If the first one doesn't work, try another one. And know that I guess the other point to make too is that purpose is a developmental thing. It goes along with identity development. And so it may be that your young person just isn't quite ready yet to figure this out. But again, these activities can help prepare them so that when they are developmentally ready, they have the tools and the inclination to discover their purpose in life. So I hope that's helpful.
I think so. And, I remember hearing Professor Damon from Stanford, who you worked with, Kendall, who said every child doesn't have to find their purpose, but they can always find something to contribute. And
Exactly.
that's a place to start, especially with an adolescent. Everybody can do some volunteering. They can help an elderly neighbor. They can help out, there's just all different ways to do it. So that's an important point, I think, too.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And a lot of times the activities that young people start out doing, they're not purposeful, they're not meaningful, at least not at first. But over time, the young person might find like, wait a minute, I'm actually pretty good at this. And I feel pretty good when I'm able to, enact whatever kind of change I'm enacting. I'm thinking of this young woman who we interviewed, followed her for 5 years. She had always been involved in the 4-H. And she liked it. It was fine. But they had to come up with an environmental, project that they could do. And she got interested in this oil recycling program. And to be honest, she said, it was just something that I could do. It seemed kind of easy. But she lived out in a rural farm area. And she said they set up these oil recycling places. And the farmers would come by and say, wow, thank you so much. I had to get rid of all this oil, in my backyard or drive hours into town. I'm so grateful that you have this here. And so this activity didn't start out certainly as a big source of purpose, but over time, as she got more involved in it, she realized, wow, my efforts actually make a difference. And I kind of enjoy this work. And she went on to do a really impressive list of environmental activities, not just oil recycling. But again, so it's trying out something that may not be purposeful right away, but may take on purpose or meaning over time.
Absolutely. Some teens in my town during the pandemic started doing scavenger hunts with little kids. Or putting little stuffed animals in the window so the kids would have something to look for on their walks. And I just thought it's a great thing to do, right?
Yeah, very, very much so. Finding a way to be useful and helpful. And, that helps with young people's self-esteem too. And, so all of these activities are means of cultivating purpose, but they're also just good to do in and of themselves. I think especially during this pandemic where, there's some scary statistics about adolescent well-being right now. And so anything you can do to help an adolescent, feel useful and feel good about him or herself is, I think, a useful activity to consider.
So Kendall, speaking of that pressure on adolescents, this is a good question. The writer asks, it seems that asking young people to define their purpose adds an undue burden. Should they really be
Yeah.
expected to know their life's purpose?
Yeah, well, and that's why I say it's really kind of a process or a journey. I mean, I think that I will say that I think adolescents are just naturally inclined to reflect on these things. And so you're not really encouraging them to do something they wouldn't otherwise do. What you're really trying to do with these exercises is to help them better articulate what's kind of already in their heart. I mean, I guess in my deep down, I really believe all people have a purpose. And sometimes we just need help sort of pulling it out and identifying it and acting on it. So if it feels like a burden, then you're probably barking up the wrong tree, right? That's probably not the purpose. Usually, the thing that gives a young person's life purpose is the activity they just can't not do. And so, what you're really helping them do is to pursue it in a way that is meaningful to them and helping to push them along that journey. So I do think if you just, or put too much pressure on a young person, you've got to figure this out today, that is undue pressure. I would definitely agree. But really the purpose is the kind of thing that you really can't stop them from doing. It's what they just want to accomplish in their lives. And I think that what can happen is young people can feel nervous when they look around. This is what happens sometimes in their 20s. And it feels like all of their friends are figuring it out and they're not there yet. And there, I think it's the role to be played is one of encouragement and compassion. It may take your son or daughter longer, and that's okay. And I think it's good to let them know that, hey, we're trying out different things. We're trying to be reflective on them. We're going to sort this out, and it will happen when it happens. It'll probably be a slow process through which they get to a particular point in time and kind of look back and realize, oh my gosh, this is it. This is really what I want to do. And I didn't realize it until just now.
Yeah, and as you say, that they appreciate being asked. I just
Yeah.
thought it was so interesting, that piece that came out of your research kind of by accident.
Purely by accident.
So here's a great question from a teacher. Scott asks, what are some of the ways that teachers can incorporate the development of purpose in their students? He is a middle school teacher.
Very good. Well, I will be honest, I find that teachers tend to be much more creative than I am. And so I bet that Scott, you could probably come up with some more creative activities than I could. I would suggest though, I mean, you could take some of these ideas and maybe try to apply them. I don't know what the subject matter is that you teach, but if you happen to teach language arts, maybe you want to pick, in the book that you're reading, maybe there's a person who has a purpose, and identifying that and asking a student to write an essay about the things that give their own life purpose would be a way of sort of incorporating that topic. Thinking about the purpose of whatever it is that they're studying. Sometimes students, maybe teach math. What is the purpose to math? What are the kinds of jobs that people using these skills can do? What good can they do in the world down the road? And just focusing on that. What is the purpose of this subject matter? Can both make the subject matter more motivating, but it can also help them start to think about, the things that they do matter, and that the lessons that they're learning in school have a purpose. And so focusing on that might help them think about the purpose in their own lives as well.
So this question is a parent's asking, in terms of the 3 questions activity that you mentioned.
Yeah.
What do you think about parents sending out those questions and then collecting the data to share with the young adult? I think the questions versus them doing it themselves.
The kids doing, yeah. We haven't tried that. The one thing I would be a little bit concerned about is that it's really important that this is a process of discovery that sort of belongs to the individual. It's their purpose in life. And so I think that them taking some steps to kind of make it happen and to solicit this feedback would probably be pretty powerful. I mean, there might be ways for you to help them sort of think about, who could you ask? And maybe before they send out their emails, you could maybe drop a few phone calls, like I said, and give these people a heads up. But I think it's important for the adolescent in particular. I mean, adolescents, they're wanting to find their own way. They're wanting a little more autonomy. They're wanting to think about these questions for themselves. So my gut tells me it'd really be better for them to do this themselves and to feel like this is sort of my activity and my discovery. And the parent is really there to kind of help support and encourage, and maybe provide a little bit of guidance, but not to do it for them.
All right. Well, thank you, Kendall. We've gotten to the end of the hour, but I love
Yeah.
to finish by just asking you, your research seems so helpful to me, but what would you like to leave us with in terms of what you hope for the future for our kids?
Right. Well, I think that this pandemic has really been tough on children and on adolescents and on parents. There's no doubt about it. But I hope that it's an opportunity for, I hope it's provided an opportunity, or maybe will continue to engage in some of the reflection around purpose. And as our restrictions start to lift, we hope, right? And we begin to resume some semblance of normalcy, we'll be able to go out in the world and pursue our purpose in life. And I hope, if nothing else, that this talk has helped parents know that there are some things they can do. There are some concrete activities they can try, and be patient and be realistic that this is a process, and just be supportive of the young person as they move through this kind of exciting search and discovery for their purpose in life.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Bronk. This has been wonderful tonight. Attendees, we will be sharing a link to her website that has some actual workbooks. Is that what you call them, Kendall?
Toolkits. Yep.
Toolkits. So that you can try some of these things at home with your own children, especially people really love that activity with the 3 questions.
Yeah.
So we'll be sharing that with you as well. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. We hope this was valuable. Thank you so much, Kendall, for tonight. Thank you to Peninsula Health Care District. Again, welcome. Good evening, everybody. And take care, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you again soon. We're going to ask those of you online to log off. Panelists, if you would join us back on screen for a minute. Thank you, everybody. Good night.